So I'm here right now in Munn Woods. This is a pretty large greenbelt here in the City of Ames. And right now what I'm looking at is wild ginger. Asarum canadens, I think, or Canadian wild ginger is the other name. Again, very good ground cover, as you can see. I believe it's done flowering, but when it does flower, oh, never mind. I really spoke too soon. Here's a flower of it. It's a three-lobed flower in a dark maroon color. So that dark maroon color indicates that it is pollinated mainly by flies, especially carrion flies. So you'll see this again in things like pawpaw trees and other dark red flowers. So that dark red kind of mimics the color and smell of rotting meat, so that will draw some of the carrion flies and other flies over to it to grab some pollen and then keep visiting some of those flowers. This is also a plant with a medicinal tuber or a medicinal root. Unfortunately, you should not eat it. It is a carcinogen and has been linked to several forms of cancer. It was used medicinally by indigenous people, again, for hundreds and thousands of years. But don't use it now. It is very, very dangerous and very, very poisonous. Causes cancer, but it gets the name from the ginger taste of that root. It's not related to ginger. It's not in the same family, but it's kind of interesting how it evolved that same sort of flavor. Again, convergent evolution, probably driving away microbes and other things like that, and protecting itself from predators or things that want to eat it. But yeah, Canadian wild ginger. If you're interested in it, it's a very good ground cover for shady areas. So if you're in town, this is probably something you want to look into. So something that's not necessarily flowering because it doesn't have flowers, but is interesting to see here in the forest. Here's horsetail. This is a relative of ferns and other spore-producing plants. It doesn't have seeds, doesn't flower, it produces via spores. So very similar to something like a fungus or a mushroom. This is a pretty ancient branch of the plant family before seeds were developed. So kind of like a living fossil that you can see out in the forest. And it's also closely related to horsetails that you'll see out in the prairie or out in the wetlands. They're really kind of straight looking ones that don't have these branching little sections. Oops, that's my hand. Those branching sections. But again, really interesting plant. I'm glad that I found it here. But yeah, it's very, very closely related to ferns, and these guys evolved before seeds were a thing. So yeah. So yeah, like what I was talking about before, here is a wetter area with a lot of those horsetails. So you'll usually see these guys in sort of wet, nutrient deficient areas. So something like a fen or a bog or something that produces peat, really that's at home with these guys. But you can see they just kind of look like little pine trees on the ground. But as you get closer, you'll see that they are not trees. They are really weird looking plants. Again, these are an ancient lineage. These were around way long ago. Like when plants first evolved on land and started getting a little taller than just the mosses that you'll see around. So they may not flower, but they are really cool, and they're something that needs to be appreciated. So here's a neat find. Again, we're in the forest. Here is another kind of weird looking flower that you probably won't notice every day. So this is Jack-in-the-Pulpit. Its flower is right under this leaf. The leaf is the flower. Isn't that cool? But again, I believe it's pollinated by carrion flies. I don't think the leaf is very tasty, or the flower is very tasty for other pollinators. You can tell it's probably not meant for other pollinators because it's not yellow or bright blue or bright red or something like that. I also believe it's almost done flowering because it's already turning a little bit brown. But Very common plant that you'll see in the underbrush of a forest or a woodland. And there's quite a bit of it. There's some right there. There's a big one right there that's flower is still open. But yeah, it's a really interesting looking plant. And when they're fruiting, they'll have a really bright red fruit. It's really hard to miss. But I believe it's poisonous, so don't eat it. But really cool looking plant. There are a bunch of relatives of this one out here too. There's something called the green dragon plant, which is really, really cool. I love that name. But it's closely related, and they'll act pretty similarly, and they're both found in forests. But yeah, Jack in the Pulpit, just a cool, cool plant. Next stop, May apples. These are May apples. They are in the barberry family. They're called May apples because they're blooming in May. Look at that. So these are kind of not very helpful with their naming. May apples, they're not apples. They don't produce apples in May, they just bloom in May. Additionally, those the plant, the fruits, the flowers are all extraordinarily toxic unless the fruit is very, 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 very ripe. That fruit needs to be yellow upon yellow upon yellow in color. It can't be green, or else if you eat it, you will get extremely sick or worse. But this is an edible plant once it turns very yellow. But even then, if you eat a large amount of it, say a whole fruit, you will get very sick. So I do not recommend eating this. I just recommend exploring the flower and appreciating the beauty of it, and then leaving the rest of the plant alone because it's very, very toxic. Not something that you want to mess around with. But the good thing about Mayflower, or May apple, is it blooms colonially. So you can see it kind of spreading all over the place here. Kind of makes up a large area of the underbrush. And you can tell May apple apart from pretty much any other plant because of the radial leaves. So this is one compound leaf in the shape of a circle, or in the shape of a wheel. They're really, really cool looking. They really do make a large majority of the underbrush at certain times of the year, especially in May. And they do have a lot of flowering parts. So the flowers are usually visited by bumblebees when they're looking for pollen. Not necessarily a nectar producing flower, but they do have a lot of pollen that bumblebees and other pollinators can use. But very, very large flowers. Let's take a look at this one. You can see how big that gets. And if you're a woodland bee and you're looking for something to get for eating, this is a very, very tempting treat. So they're very good at attracting pollinators, but they only produce flowers in May. So if you're interested in taking a look at some of these, again, this is Munn Woods. They're kind of all over the place. So you're not really going to miss it. They're really, really cool specimens, and they're really cool flowers. So go ahead and find some of these. Don't eat them. Don't eat the apples that they produce later on. Even if they are ripe, they are poisonous. They also don't taste like anything. So reports have said they're extremely bland. And they kind of taste like an underripe melon. So they're not even good. So don't even bother foraging or trying them. Poisonous and boring tasting. Just go out and get a melon from the grocery store. But yeah, May apples. They are a really, really cool species, especially with those radial leaves. So my main goal today, while I'm in the woods, in this case Munn Woods, is to find a not necessarily rare, but uncommon and just kind of cool plant called the showy orchis. This is a fairly large orchid that's native to the eastern U.S. I've never seen one in the wild, and I really want to see one. So the main point of me coming out to Munn Woods is not only to chronicle all the plants that are out here right now and blooming, but also to see if I can find that orchid. I mean, along the way, we're finding some really cool stuff anyway. So even if I don't find it, I won't be too sad, i.e. May apples, which are just cool in their own right, with those giant flowers. But really I'm just looking for that orchis. So if you are aware of anywhere that has a showy orchis, or if you think you might have one and are interested in having someone clarify or determine if that's actually it, feel free to let me know. I really want to see one. I haven't seen one before, like I said before, and they are really cool looking. So yeah, but I will still chronicle anything else that I see along the way, including a ton of garlic mustard. The unfortunate thing about Munn Woods is it is more or less destroyed by a lot of garlic mustard. I'm not sure why it hasn't been treated or why people aren't removing it, but it is all over the place. And this is it kind of light on the garlic mustard down here. On my way in, there's just a ton along the Hickory Drive entrance. So again, unfortunate, just like Moore Memorial. I mean, that whole thicket back there is garlic mustard. But if you feel like doing a good deed, yeah, that's something that I would recommend. Start pulling. But yeah, on to hopefully find the showy orchis. I missed bumblebees. There's a big queen flying around, if you can hear her. There she goes. I don't know what she's doing on the forest floor. She's kind of dancing around a little bit, maybe trying to distract me. I think we're close to her nest. But she's a queen. Queen Bombus impatiens, or common eastern bumblebee. Looking for food. Or looking for her nest. She forgot where it is. But yeah, really important pollinators. This isn't the first queen I saw today. I've seen probably around 3 or 4. But I'm glad that they are here in Munn Woods. That means their population is pretty stable. Just unfortunate that I've only seen impatiens and not any other species. If you all know, we are home to the rusty patched bumblebee here in Ames, or central Iowa. But I haven't seen any, ever. There are records that they are here in the city, but not by me. And then the American bumblebee is another one that's threatened right now. So still looking for those. I haven't seen any American bumblebees yet this year, but some people have. So I'm still looking. So keep you guys in mind if I find one. There you go. So here is woodland or blue phlox. As you can see from this flower right here, it's not just the first part of the flower with the petals, but it extends all the way back pretty far to the rest of the plant. So blue phlox, being more of a tube-shaped flower rather than kind of a landing pad-shaped flower, these guys are really pollinated mainly by butterflies and sometimes by hummingbirds if they come along. So these guys store their nectar and their pollen at the very back of that tube. So really the only thing that can get to it is something with a long tongue, like butterflies. So when the butterflies stick that long tongue or proboscis all the way back into the tube, they'll accidentally pick up some pollen from the back of the flower. And as they move on to another flower, that pollen that was accidentally put on the mouth parts or the tube gets put to the next flower and pollinates it. These are very closely related to prairie phlox, which is another phlox species that will come out in a couple weeks in the prairie, obviously. The only difference is the color. So prairie phlox is going to be a lot brighter and a lot more pink, while this one's a lot darker blue. These guys grow in the woods, and prairie phlox obviously grows in grasslands and prairies. You might have phlox in your garden at home, and it's also closely related to these guys. Really, they are a good nectar plant for butterflies. So if you're interested in growing phlox, pick out one of the native ones, and they will help our local butterflies. So throughout this video, you might have noticed I'm not really talking a lot about trees. Let's change that. So one of the main trees that people like to take a look at in the woods is this bumpy looking one. So you can see that it has like ridges and bumps all over the place from the top all the way down to the bottom. I kind of zoomed in a little bit. But this is hackberry. So Hackberry is a favorite of beavers, so if you see one of these along a creek side, chances are it might have some damage down near the trunk or the base of the trunk. That's from beavers trying to get a quick bite to eat. Apparently the wood tastes very good to them. It's not their first choice. That would be something like a cottonwood, but when there's not a lot of cottonwood out, this is their second best choice. A good thing about hackberries is they are edible when they actually do produce fruits. They don't really taste that great, or they don't really taste much like anything, but they're one of the few fruits that has a complete set of carbohydrates, fats, and sugars. So it's one of those rare fruits that really packs a big punch nutritionally. The only problem is they don't taste very great. So if you do decide to eat some of them, they are perfectly edible as long as you know what you're looking at, as long as you know how to identify hackberry. They are food and they will give you nutrition, but they just don't taste very good. Some people like to call them sugar berries because they say that the flesh, no matter how small it is, it's mostly seed, tastes very sweet. But again, most of the fruit is going to be seed, which is providing probably more of the nutrients. But yeah, not a great tasting fruit, but very nutritionally sound. So if you are stuck in the woods and need to eat something, try to find a hackberry before the beavers do. Okay, and I think this might be our last find of the day. These are in the daisy family, and they have a really funny name. These are pussy toes. I know, hilarious. They get their name because they are fluffy and they kind of look like the feet of cats. They are fuzzy and kind of cool looking. They, again, are in the daisy family. So they're related to sunflowers, dandelions, all that fun stuff. And these are a springtime bloom. So I'm sure that they are almost done. But you won't really see a lot of these guys, really anywhere that you go. At least not in pretty high abundance. But it's kind of cool to see them on a little outcropping. As you can see, there's kind of a cliff face here, with some invasives down there, but kind of growing right on the edge. But they are really cool. Really just the most unique about one of the most unique things about them is their name, and when they bloom. So if you see something that kind of looks like this, not really a conspicuous flower, but kind of a white fuzzy thing, those are pussy toes. So I think this is going to wrap up that search for the orchid. I've been most places around Munn Woods. Haven't seen a lot. Seen a lot of garlic mustard, but no orchids. I was able to see a lot of interesting plants that I haven't seen this year yet. Things like pussy toes, things like May-apples, hackberries, all that fun stuff. But no orchids, which is kind of sad. But I will keep searching throughout the year, hopefully finding more places that they might be and actually finding orchids. But nothing this time. Something else that I'm surprised that I didn't find was red columbine. So that's another more foresty, kind of shade-tolerant plant, and it's not here. It's not really like it's hard to miss. It's very bright red and yellow, but I'm surprised I haven't found any. It's kind of sad, but it is what it is. If you want to see columbine, it's a very popular garden plant, so your neighbors might have it, or you might have it. Something cool about columbine is it has those spikes at the end of the flower that hold the nectar. So it's a really attractive plant for butterflies and hummingbirds. So if you're looking to get some more of those in your yard or on your garden, that's a good option. But I haven't seen any here. It's called wild columbine, and I haven't seen it out in the wild, which is unfortunate. But that's going to be about it for this tour of Munn Woods and trying to find some flowers to talk to you guys about. Hope you enjoyed today's video. We'll be back again for another one, probably in about a month, as we see the early blooming prairie species. So it'll be a little less shady, a lot more sunny, and you'll see a lot more wildflowers. So thanks for joining, and I will see you guys next time.